what's happening to American democracy, with the billionaire demagogue on the right, a self-declared socialist on the left, and disenchanted voters turning their backs on the political establishment. The nomination race for this year's presidential election has become the most polarized for decades. In a two-part special report, Bob Abeshouse has been finding out why.
Few took it seriously when billionaire and reality TV star Donald Trump launched his campaign for America's highest office last June.
I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
Pundits thought it was a stunt to promote the Trump brand and predicted he would soon be gone. But Trump has not only stuck around, he is winning state after state in the Republican primary.
I am going to be the greatest jobs president that God ever created. Remember that.
His message is light on policy specifics, but it targets people's economic anxieties and provides them with scapegoats.
When Mexico sends its people, they're sending people that have lots of problems. And they're bringing in drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
Trump promises to build a wall on the Mexican border to stop them. Playing to people's racial resentments and fear is a central element of his populist strategy.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
It's one of the functions of a president to turn anger into hope. And I'm afraid that Trump is not deflecting the anger, he's intensifying it.
William Galston is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. He writes extensively on American public policy.
I'm astounded by Donald Trump's success so far. Many of us have been writing about the loss of trust in our governing institutions, about some of the economic problems, but I think we all underestimated the extent to which all of this was coming together into discontent, anxiety, and outright anger.
The greed of the billionaire class in corporate America is destroying this country. It's going to end.
In the Democratic primary, U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, a self-declared socialist, is also tapping into discontent and anger with a populist campaign from the left.
What's characteristic of European politics and increasingly of American politics is that the center is weakening.
Does that say something about the state of democracy in America today?
It may. It was the weakening of the middle class in Germany in the 1920s in response first to hyperinflation and then to depression that paved the way for totalitarian government.
Are you concerned about the success of Donald Trump?
There are signs that long-standing restraints on what it's respectable to advocate in public are breaking down, and this could lead to dangerous public policy unless cooler heads prevail, and right now it's not clear that they will. So yes, I am.
The appeal of outsiders like Trump and Sanders in the 2016 election points to economic problems and institutional decay. To explore what happened to American democracy and where it is headed, we traveled to Vigo County, Indiana. Terre Haute, the county seat, is known as the crossroads of America.
What's so unique about our county is that we're kind of a mixing pot, a blend of a lot of different backgrounds.
The people of Vigo County have voted for the winner in every presidential election since 1888, except two, and haven't picked a loser since 1952. Randy Gentry is the chair of the county Republican Party.
We're socially liberal, fiscally conservative. It's not unique to have a factory sitting next to a cornfield We have 3 universities here that bring in international components to our community as well. You're not going to find another community that brings all those dynamics to one table.
Vigo County also has a high proportion of ticket splitters, people who will vote for both Democrats and Republicans.
Tonight we're doing our monthly Politics and Pie. We gather together as a Republican Party just to talk about the latest news within politics and around the country.
Of the candidates this year, who's generating excitement?
Donald Trump. I had more people stop and want to, can I have a yard sign, or can I have a bumper sticker, can I have a button?
Trump's saying a lot of what a lot of people think. He's going to get a lot of Democrat votes just from what he's saying. He's bringing up a lot of issues that should have been brought up.
I think people won't necessarily tell you that they like him because it's controversial. It'll raise eyebrows, I think, but I think they'll vote for him.
He says what he believes in. You don't have to kiss anybody's butt. You can do what he wants. And that's, a lot of people like that.
He can't be bought. That's what I hear on the street.
I don't need anybody's money. I'm using my own money. I'm not using the lobbyists. I'm not using donors. I don't care.
Trump sets himself apart from ordinary politicians by highlighting the corruption of the campaign finance system.
I've given to Democrats. I've given to Hillary. I've given to everybody because that was my job. I got to give to them because when I want something, I get it. When I call, they kiss my ass. Okay, it's true. They kiss my ass.
Democrat Bernie Sanders, who relies on small donations from ordinary voters, also highlights the corrosive influence of campaign cash.
Tonight we serve notice that the American people will not continue to accept a corrupt campaign finance system that is undermining American democracy.
There's a broad sense in the American public that the game is rigged, that regular people don't have the opportunity to express their views and be represented the way that moneyed interests do.
Michael Dimmick is president of the Pew Research Center, the top nonpartisan polling organization in the United States.
We're in a period of deep, deep distrust in Washington right now. Only 19% of Americans trust the federal government to do what is right. That elected officials listening and responding and caring about their constituents has been compromised by the influence of money. 75% think the problem is worse today than it's been in the past.
A 2010 U.S. Supreme Court decision in a case known as Citizens United unleashed a tsunami of cash into the U.S. electoral process. It overturned a ban on campaign spending by corporations and unions, permitting them to make unlimited expenditures on behalf of a candidate.
Those organizations, like the AFL-CIO labor unions, can put that much money in, and then, of course, big business can put a lot of money in. That is a big concern.
A few months later, another court decision allowed wealthy individuals, along with unions and corporations, to make unlimited contributions to political entities backing candidates known as super PACs. Super PACs now spend hundreds of millions of dollars on political ads, like this one from a super PAC backing Republican Ted Cruz that attacks the foreign policy experience of his rival Marco Rubio.
Keep the Promise One is responsible for the content of this advertising.
What's different about the way that money is flowing into the process is that it is not flowing into the process through channels that are controlled or steered, directed by either the political parties themselves or their candidates. We may never know the full extent of how much is spent.
Ken Vogel is the chief investigative reporter for the Washington, D.C. publication Politico. He focuses on money and politics.
Trump's success and Trump's ability to stay on top of the polls is a function of the new money and politics system that we have, both because there is a weaker Republican Party that is unable to do the things necessary to make it more difficult for him to continue to run, but also super PACs being able to support other candidates who might not otherwise be able to stay in the race.
Why have the new rules in regard to campaign finance weakened American political parties?
The Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, sort of precipitated the migration of money and power away from the organized political parties into these billionaires and millionaires and outside groups funded by them.
What happened to Jeb Bush?
And instead of targeting Trump early on, super PACs funded by wealthy contributors attacked rivals competing for the establishment vote.
Marco Rubio.
He ran for These candidates without that super PAC might not otherwise be able to sustain a campaign for a prolonged period of time. Their ability to do so has made it harder for a single alternative to Trump to arise and take him on.
The man perhaps most responsible for the rise of super PACs is attorney James Bopp. He lives in Terre Haute and is a special counsel to the Republican National Committee.
I brought the case on behalf of Citizens United, handled the case in the district court, got the case accepted by the United States Supreme Court. You know, in my view, these restrictions were contrary to the First Amendment, and not enough money was being spent in our elections. As a result, people were really woefully ignorant of even basic facts about our electoral system.
What do you say about the argument that the rise of super PACs has contributed to the weakening of the party, and that is not good for democracy?
That is true, but the resolution of that is striking the restrictions on political parties so that they, just like super PACs, can compete.
Donald Trump, when I spoke to a lot of people in Terre Haute, right? I mean, one of the strongest arguments on his behalf is that he can't be bought. And he also says, you know, that he's given money to politicians and he knows what that means.
He's bragging.
In any event, I mean, it's an appealing message to voters.
Sure. There's a very deep cynicism in America, and there always has been, about politicians and government.
But the cynicism about money in politics has grown enormously. 2/3 of Americans think that Citizens United fundamentally changed and undermined democracy. Isn't that a problem? If people start to doubt the process and think that the wealthy are the ones that are getting the laws written on their behalf.
I disagree that for a healthy democracy, we need to trust the government. No, we need to be cynical about the government. We need to understand that the government is there to take our money and to give it to friends of theirs. That's what the Democrats do. It's called redistribution.
In fact, tax bills in Congress that affect the distribution of income are the best place to find out who really has power and influence in Washington, D.C.
Taxes is probably the biggest battle there is that pits wealthy special interests, both corporations and rich people, against everybody else.
Frank Clemente lobbies on Capitol Hill for a public interest group called Americans for Tax Fairness.
We've done a lot of polling on taxes. Exhibit A for the public about why the system is rigged, why the system is corrupt, is their view that the tax system is designed for the wealthy, it's designed for big corporations.
In 2014, Clemente's group released a report analyzing lobbying by corporations, Wall Street, and the high-tech industry over tax breaks that get extended by Congress every year or two.
What surprised you most about this study when you were doing it?
The number of lobbyists. 1,400 lobbyists is a lot of lobbyists. It's a lot of people. It's a small army, and that they're up here lobbying Congress day in and day out on these issues.
The reason U.S. companies are so keen on buying influence in Congress is because it allows them to push through legislation that is of enormous financial benefit. One of the best examples of this is a law that creates a loophole that allows companies to avoid paying taxes on their huge profits unless that money is brought back into the U.S. The loophole is called the active financing exception.
This chart shows the top 30 companies and trade associations that were lobbying on the active financing exception over a 3-year period. And General Electric is at the top. They've got a financial arm called GE Capital. We've got Citigroup, which is obviously one of the biggest banks.
Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase. These are a lot of the banks that got bailed out in 2008.
Yep, and their trade associations.
Clemente's report only covered lobbying from 2011 through September 2013. We brought it up to date and added an analysis of campaign contributions.
What do you see in this chart?
Yeah, well, you've got $1.1 billion was spent by these 30 companies on lobbying. That works with what we got.
So here, these companies have given $17 million to Democrats and $20 million to Republicans. So the active financing exception has been a good way for politicians to raise money, too.
Oh, yeah. And the way to think about campaign contributions is it's a big door opener. It's what gets you your phone calls answered, your face-to-face time with the senator. Because if you weren't giving campaign contributions and you're just lobbying, you're only half in the game.
To some, it's also where American democracy has come to die. Last December, the U.S. Congress passed a tax bill that made the active financing exception loophole permanent.
There was a $78 billion tax giveaway to corporations and largely to Wall Street financial houses. Money that could go to make critical investments in this country, or money that could go to help reduce the deficit if you're fiscally conservative.
Where is that $78 billion going to end up? A lot of it in places like this, the Cayman Islands. A mecca not only for tourists, but wealthy tax dodgers and the U.S. Fortune 500.
Hidden among all of this is a major financial center. We found that 1/4 of the Fortune 500 companies had a subsidiary in the Caymans.
Richard Phillips is the primary author of Offshore Shell Games, a report released last October that examined the use of tax havens by American companies.
How much money does the Fortune 500 keep offshore?
Our study found that about $2.1 trillion is being held by these companies offshore, and that if they were forced to pay taxes on it, they would pay about $620 billion.
So here we are at Ooglan House.
Yeah, Ooglan House is the home to nearly 20,000 corporations, even though, as you can see, it's a relatively small building.
So the companies are registered here?
Yeah, and they claim that this is their address so that they can take advantage of all these different tax loopholes and pay nothing in taxes. The IRS data shows that U.S. companies are reporting $51 billion a year in profits in the Cayman Islands.
According to American tax policy, it's all legal, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely legal. What most of these companies are doing are following the letter of the law.
I have done a lot of work with international companies, yes.
Attorney Patrick Schmid, who heads a legal services firm called Alps, has helped many American companies set up subsidiaries in the Caymans.
I don't know what is meant by the Caymans being a tax haven. I consider Cayman an international financial center.
But come on, the best thing the Caymans offers is no taxes, isn't it?
Quite often they don't even tell us. We're only a small portion of the entirety of the transaction.
Are people in the financial industry down here aware of debates in the Congress over tax policy? If they decide to eliminate the active financing exception, that it's going to impact our business?
Yes, I mean, by and large, the legal community here would be very much cognizant of and constantly watching the things that goes on in the jurisdictions from which we get the majority of our business.
The U.S. Congress could shut it down at any time, but it's because of the lobbying from the corporations and it's because of the influence of U.S. business that we haven't shut it down.
Various firms and business associations who lobbied for the active financing exception, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Securities and Financial Markets Association, declined our request for an interview.
In the 1950s, corporations were paying about 1/3 of all of the federal government's expenses. Today, it's down to just about 1/10 of all taxes. I think it's made people a lot more cynical. They say, why am I paying thousands of dollars in taxes every year while these companies who make billions of dollars pay nothing?
It reduces or eliminates most of the deductions and loopholes available to special interests and to the very rich.
The only specific economic policy Trump has put forth to date is a plan that eliminates taxes for millions of Americans.
If you're married and jointly earn less than $50,000, you'll not pay any income tax, nothing.
It's estimated Trump's plan would increase the debt by about $10 trillion over 10 years, but it would also prevent companies from parking money in tax havens like the Caymans.
So it ends the deferral of taxes on corporate income earned abroad.
Democrat Bernie Sanders also wants to eliminate offshore tax loopholes.
You have major corporations stashing their money in the Cayman Islands and other tax havens, and in a given year not paying a nickel in federal taxes. Okay? We are going to make them pay their taxes.
But unlike Trump, Sanders would not cut taxes for corporations or allow them to repatriate their trillions at a discounted rate. The differences between the two aren't lost on union leaders back in Terre Haute. We caught up with Tom Szymanski of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers at an apprentice training program.
We have to, as working class people, blue collar people, as middle class people, stay with the candidates that really do have our own interests in mind and not a billionaire.
Are the unions as strong here in Terre Haute as they were in the past?
In Terre Haute itself, we're still doing pretty well. It's always been known since the late 1800s to be a strong union town.
Terre Haute was the home of the American Union leader Eugene Debs, one of Bernie Sanders' heroes.
What are you hearing from your members about the election?
We see a split pretty much between our members kind of talking about Donald Trump and supporting what he's saying. And then on the other side, we have a lot of talk and support for Bernie Sanders. It's interesting that they're not really going with the mainstream political candidates like they did in the past.
Why do your members like Trump?
Well, unfortunately, it's the jobs issues. With a lot of folks, immigration seems to be kind of the focal point.
So they think immigration affects wages?
Yes, instead of blaming the economics, they want a scapegoat.
Is it tough for middle-class people in Terre Haute right now?
I think they're tough anywhere in the country right now for the middle class. We had a wide variety of industry here, but because of different economic factors, trade deals, and jobs going overseas, we've lost a lot of that.
I'm angry at incompetence. I'm angry when China's making $500 billion a year and sucking our jobs and sucking our money out of our country, and we don't do anything about it.
White working-class voters who have been hurt by globalization and trade are the core of Trump's support. Over the last 30 years, the hourly wages of workers in the U.S. have been stagnant or fallen.
Many of them are angry about economic conditions, but more than that, they experience a sense of insult, loss of status. They think that elites look down on them. They feel that each political party has taken them for granted in different ways, so it's now coming out as a kind of rejection of the establishment as a whole.
Trump is also tapping into lingering anger over the 2008 Wall Street crash and its aftermath.
One of the deep, deep frustrations coming out of the economic downturn was a sense that nobody was held accountable for a failure in the economic process that led to hundreds and thousands of people losing equity and wealth that they had spent decades building up in home ownership in particular.
The American middle class, which has been shrinking since the 1970s, is no longer the country's economic majority. That's a condition Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton also promises to reverse.
The middle class needs a raise. And more good jobs, jobs that pay enough for a family to live on.
It is not a good idea for democratic governments to allow the needs of the middle class and the needs of people who are working hard to get into the middle class to be ignored for a great length of time, and unfortunately that is what has been happening.
All around Terre Haute, we kept bumping into people who felt Trump has what it takes to really respond to the needs of the middle class.
We need jobs. So sometimes you need a businessman to negotiate, not a politician.
This man and other volunteers were pumping gas to raise donations for the needy.
Everyone's struggling and, money's tight these days, so the need keeps getting greater and greater.
This volunteer said he comes from a solid Democratic family, but is voting for Trump.
Now I'm crossing the threshold into a new era with a Republican.
But Trump's never been in politics.
I don't think we really need somebody that has a political background. I think we just need to have somebody that's got common sense and can work numbers well.
So you think Trump can win the whole thing?
I think he's going to win, period. I think he's our new man. He's in.
The skills of a CEO are not directly transferable to the Oval Office. It doesn't work that way.
Do you think American politics may be on the verge of a major transition that can empower right-wing populism or give birth to a new era of progressivism?
If you look at what's distinctive about American political culture, it's belief in the American dream. If you work hard, you try to do the right things for your family, that you'll move ahead. That it's within your control to determine your economic destiny. And this loss of sense of control, if that persists, it will lead to very significant political changes, the exact shape of which I am not smart enough to predict, but I know they will happen.
Next week,
No shut down.
the attack on voting rights and the culture war pulling American democracy apart.